Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to prepare for interviews. And generally, this is just how to ace the hiring process. So, all the things that you need to know when you're going into your interview to help you get hired. First things first, I'm job coach Adessa. I work at Malden on Thursdays and Chelsea on Wednesdays, and I'm from a local job force board that helps students explore their career interests, apply to jobs, make resumes, cover letters, anything job related I help with. And this is one of those aspects that we're going to be talking about today. This is a little sample of what we could work on in an individual job coaching session. Some of these are going to be more important for you later on in your career when you're in a more specialized field in a specific career that you're interested in. For these jobs that you're applying for right now, these store jobs, retail jobs, you're most likely just going to be doing one-on-one interviews, phone screening interviews, or informational interviews. Sometimes you'll have a task-based interview with these sorts of jobs. That's typically going to be something that you'll do on the application. Right now, you're mostly going to have one-on-one interviews, and that's going to be with the hiring manager that looked over your application. So, a good thing to do beforehand to see if you can find any information about that hiring manager, anything that maybe they're interested in at the company, if they have any of that. That might not be available right now for the jobs that you're looking at, but in the future, that's definitely information that will be available. You also have phone screening, so some jobs will call you just to ask you a few preliminary questions on the phone, just to see if you might be a good fit. Some of these questions will focus on your availability, your interest in working. They aren't getting into the real like meat and potatoes of the interview just yet. And sometimes the phone screening will be combined with an informational interview. So an informational interview is just giving you an idea of what the role is, what you would be doing in that role, and whether or not it's something that you'd actually be interested in. So right now you'll probably have the phone and informational interview wrapped into one, and then after that you'll have a one-on-one interview. It's possible you could have a second interview, it really depends, but for most jobs, especially these like retail and service jobs, you're just going to have those initial phone screening and then the one-on-one. Later on in your career, you could have a group interview. You're with other candidates, and it could also be that you're interviewing with multiple people at the organization. It depends on the kind of job and what you're doing there. When you're actually going to answer these interview questions, this is the format that you want to use. So once you've identified the type of interview that it is, you're thinking, okay, how am I going to prepare these answers? You're going to try and think of specific examples that you can give in response to every single question. So you always want to be able to guide the person that's interviewing you through your answer and have it very clear and cohesive. That's what you're looking for. And this format will really help you do that. So you want to start with S, situation. What was going on? So if you are talking about an example where maybe you failed a test and you felt really bad, but you wanted to keep trying because you didn't want to fail the class overall. That's the situation. I failed a test and I was feeling really bad about myself, but I had to figure out what to do so that I could do well in the class. The obstacle, what issues came up? So in this scenario, maybe the obstacle is that you failed. Maybe the obstacle is that you didn't study properly. Maybe you studied too close to the test date. Maybe you studied the wrong information, etc. Try to think of a specific example of an obstacle. Then the action. What did you do in response? So in this example we're using, maybe you changed the way that you're studying. Maybe you went to the teacher to ask questions about it. What did you do to make the situation better? And then the result, what happened because of your actions? Did you end up passing the next test and passing the class overall? You can talk about any situation that applies to you. Right now, you might not have a lot of specific formal work experience, so you can think about examples of anything that you feel like you're proud of how you handled a situation. It doesn't just have to be something related to class. It could be maybe you had some issues in your friend group and you were sort of a mediator there. Maybe you were working on a group project and you had to pick up some more work than you thought was maybe fair. How did you handle that? Maybe you had a conflict over chores at home and you had to, negotiate a schedule of balancing the chores that you needed to do at the house and the homework that you had to do. All of these are examples that you can use to talk about in an interview. So now that you have this format in mind, you can start thinking about some of the most common interview questions. So we have tell me about yourself. That's one that's a little bit difficult, and it's one that you're probably always going to get asked. What I like to recommend when you're doing this is that you think of one like important thing about yourself. Like maybe you're a people person, maybe you're a hard worker. We're going to have an example after this slide of what that can look like, two different answers. The most important thing is think of how do you want to start this and use that to guide. So you have this overall idea of who you are, and then what are these examples of how that's shown up in your daily life, in the work that you've done. Greatest strengths and weaknesses, you typically want to have three. for each just to prepare. You don't necessarily have to talk about all of them. And the most important thing about this question that you want to remember is that you don't want to just say, oh, I'm bad at this and I'm good at this. If you have a weakness that you're talking about, you want to say, oh, maybe I struggle with time management, and here's what I've done to get better with that. So you always want to have those follow-up pieces of it. Why do you want this position? What makes you the best candidate for this role? That's something that you'll probably get asked even in these like service jobs. And you can talk about how you like working with people, how you want to learn more, get more experience, managing a lot of different tasks, etc., something like that. Later on in your career, you want to specifically research the company. You want to have a list of reasons why you like this company, why you like this position, what about it appeals to you. So that's something that you need to think a bit more through when you're later in your career. But for right now, you can think, oh, maybe I like the clothes at this retail store, or I like the food and I spend a lot of time there. They're not going to fact check you on that, so you can really say anything. Most importantly, you just want to say something that will make you seem like a good candidate. So try and think of those things. Some of the other most common questions, tell me about a time you made a mistake or failed. That one's pretty straightforward. What motivates you? This is something that you can think of similarly to tell me about yourself. You're thinking of what do you think is one of the most important things about you? Do you feel like you're hardworking, that you're driven, that you have a specific goal, something like that? Those are the kinds of answers that you can have there. And you always want to have an example after that. So something that shows how that's applicable in your everyday life. Tell me about how conflict you've faced and how you've handled it. That one's pretty straightforward. What is your greatest professional or personal experience? This is something that really can be up to you. You really want to think of like what you're actually proud of. You don't necessarily have to cater this one as much. You want to maybe again, later in your career, if you're applying to a nonprofit or something like that, you want to make sure that it's centered on the work you've done and not necessarily yourself. So maybe the people that you've worked with, not like, oh, I did this, like I got a degree or something like that. You want to think, oh, I ran a program that helped all of these students. That's a difference there. But again, that's for later. For right now, you can talk about how you feel like you've been really good at balancing school with your extracurricular activities. Maybe you won a class election. Maybe you're the head of a club, something along those lines. And then, do you have any questions for us? This one's really important. It's very easy to skip this one. Questions that you can ask are, what does it look like to work a day in this job? What do you like about this job? You always want to have questions to ask because, again, not everyone does, and that can really set you apart.
Hi, my name is Kayla. I am the hiring manager here at Chick-fil-A. I'll be hiring for the front of house position. And let's just start with a simple question. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Of course. It's very nice to meet you, first of all. My name is Dessa. The first thing to know about me is I consider myself a people person. That's why I applied for this job. I really love talking to people, getting to know them, and specifically in the customer service area, I love making sure that every person comes in and like feels a little bit better when they leave, that they've had that good of an interaction. I feel like the times that I've gone in to get food or into a store, etc., whenever I interact with the workers there and I feel like they're actually engaged with me and asking me follow-up questions and like listening to me when I talk, even if it's just something as small as taking their order, I definitely feel like I have a better experience overall. I think I really wanted to be in this position because I want to be that person for other people and just have that opportunity to really hone those skills and see what it looks like in that front of house position.
Thank you for having me. My name is Kayla. I am a current junior at Everett High School. Some of my past experience includes babysitting my younger sibling, where I would engage in appropriate play as well as preparing foods and meals for them. Some of my hobbies include cooking as well as photography, and my future plans, I hope to someday go to culinary arts school where I can be prepared to open my own restaurant business someday.
Another thing that you can consider when you're thinking about these possible answers to these questions is that you can cater your descriptions. You can actually go in and look at the job application and see how they're describing what they're looking for. So in this case, we have friendly, outgoing personality if you love people. So your answers, you can emphasize how much you like working with people and how much you like getting to know people and helping them. Maybe you can talk about a specific customer experience service that you've had that you want to give to someone else. Jump in to help fellow crew members when needed. Teamwork, you can emphasize how much you've done teamwork in a group project. Another good example. So you can really pay attention to what they're seeking and the kind of language that they use and use that to cater your descriptions. So now that you have that information, how are you actually going to use it? What are you thinking about? You're going to have all the questions that you might get asked, and you're going to prepare some potential answers. You're not going to write all the answers out because you don't want it to be rehearsed. You're going to write down something for each of the SOAR steps. So you're going to have a situation, obstacle, action, result for every single possible question. An important thing to remember is that you can't prepare for every possible question that they're going to ask you. It's just impossible. You don't want to stress yourself out by trying to do that. Rather, what you want to do is have all of these source scenarios down, and you can think of, oh, this could apply to this specific question, but you can also pivot to other questions. So when you're practicing beforehand by yourself, rather than thinking this is always going to have to be with this question, you're practicing just the source scenario, and it could be something that works with this question, but it could also work with these other questions. And having that in mind can be really helpful for you so that you're not so focused on the script that you have. Because what can happen if you have this script that you're trying to follow is you can get thrown off. If they ask you a question that you didn't prepare for, that's unexpected, all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have anything for that one. If you just focus on the source scenarios above all, then you'll always have an answer because you can just pull from different source scenarios. So I would recommend making a list of all of your source scenarios first that you can think of, and then seeing how they can fit to different questions. So you can kind of know if you do get asked some of those most common questions, but you can still pivot if you need to. Now, in terms of actually showing up to the interview outside of preparation, these are the things you want to keep in mind. The dress code is business casual. This picture just shows you some examples of what that can look like. For women, you're thinking high neck shirts or dresses, so things that cover you up. A skirt or dress that's appropriate length, that's typically down to your knees. You don't want to wear anything too short. You could also wear dress pants or a blazer. For men, you can wear dress pants, a button-up shirt, blazer, or a polo shirt. And for anyone who's non-binary or gender non-conforming, you can use any combination of the above items, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But the most important thing here is that you want to appear smart and modest. And there are specific types of clothes that, give that impression. So you want to keep that in mind when you're preparing for an interview. You also want to make sure that the day of when you're coming, you bring your resume. You want to bring something to write on and something to write with. These things help you look engaged and ready for the interview. So they might already have a copy of your resume from your application, but if you bring another copy of it, that shows that you're very prepared. And that's something that can also help you stand out. Something to write on and something to write with is even if you don't necessarily use it through the whole interview, it still helps you stay engaged and in the moment. So you can take notes about maybe the types of questions that they're asking, how you feel like you're doing, those sorts of things. This is especially helpful when you're asking the questions. You can take notes on what their responses are. In the future, you are just as much interviewing them as they're interviewing you. You're determining if this is a place that you would really want to work. Right now, you could just be focused on making money, and that's totally fair and valid. So it's not as important, but you still want to get in the habit of practicing this active listening during interviews. So after the interview, unfortunately, not all places follow the same timeline for when they're going to email you and let you know about the result. Most places will get back to you within a month, but if they don't, you can reach out to them. Like I said, you have a lot of power in this situation as well, and it's important to remember that. There are 3 options for how you can do this. You can email, call, or go in person. If you feel like you had a really great interview and you have a really good shot, I think going in person is really helpful and makes you stand out. That's also applicable even if you don't feel like you had a great interview. Going in person is always the gold standard. It helps employers remember your face and it helps set you apart from other people who might not be doing that. If you want to email or call, what you can do, what this can look like, is you start off by talking about how you're thankful for them taking the time to talk with you, what you like in terms of what excited you when you were listening to the job description, why you would want to work there, and why you feel like you would be a good fit. So the first paragraph, you're thanking them. The second paragraph, you're talking about this is why I would want to work here. And the third paragraph, you're saying, and this is why you would want me to work here. I have these specific skills, as we've talked about in the interview, and I would love to hear back, or at least have a timeline of when I might hear back. This is totally normal and acceptable to email. And I would say if you really were set on working at a specific place, you should email them. If you were kind of meh about it in the first place, it's okay if you don't. If you want to call them, you can also follow this script. You might not say as much, but you can keep the same ideas behind it. You're thanking them for their time, saying I was really excited about the idea of working there, and I think that I would be a great candidate for this role because of X, Y, and Z. Thank you so much. I would just love to hear more about what the timeline looks like. That's the kind of language you can use. So for actually practicing these skills, there are a few resources that you can use. There's Talk Higher. This is a helpful resource because it gives you real-time feedback, so you can record your answers and then you will automatically get feedback from their system saying, here's what you did well and here's what you can improve on. Very helpful. You could go check out some of these common interview questions so that you can prepare your SOAR answers and see how they might mix and match with those those questions. You can also look at this behavioral interview guide. So it's talking about the kind of tips that you can use, how you can make yourself seem more approachable, how you want to think about the answers that you're giving. This is another cheat sheet that you can use that gives you some of these common questions and ways that you could answer them. So I'll leave this up here for a second. You can take a screenshot. So the first step in preparing for an interview is sitting down and writing out all these source scenarios. Try and think of as many as you can. I would recommend having at least 3 to 5. It's a lot to memorize, so you don't have to make them too long. You want to make sure that you're practicing them though. So you can write down a lot at first, and then you can go over them, practice saying them out loud, and then slowly get to a point where you say the same things, but you're not looking at your sheet. And you can have other people interview you so it feels more realistic. You can have a friend, your parent, your job coach, your teacher, have them ask you these questions and see what it feels like to, answer them in real time. You can also have them vary up the order that they ask them in so you know what it feels like to maybe be asked something that you're not prepared for. I would recommend having a list of these questions and giving them to someone and saying, hey, can you ask me like 5 of these questions? And see what it feels like to be asked things that you might not have prepared for, but you have source scenarios that could work there. So the order in which you're doing things is you're preparing your source stories. 1. 2, you're trying to think of how those source stories can apply to different interview questions. So that's where you can make that list of interview questions that you could share with someone. 3, you're practicing. And in this step, you have the practicing that comes with reading straight off the page and seeing what that feels like. And then the 4th step is practicing where you're not looking at the page. And both of those, 3 and 4, can be by yourself or with someone else. And then 5 is have the interview. So that's all that you want to do. That's how you want to think about this whole process. And you have that information about how you can follow up with the employers after the interview. And so that's all from me. Now it's your turn to go through all of these steps and get all of those answers ready and really succeed in your interview. If you follow this, you have a really good chance. Of course, there's always the possibility that you don't get a job, but the better you do at an interview, the more likely it is. And even if you don't get the job, it's still important to practice. It's still important to have these things prepared because it makes you better at interviewing for the next job. Every interview opportunity is a learning opportunity. That's what you want to try and keep in mind. Sometimes it just isn't a right fit, and that has nothing to do with you. You still could have done a great job. So keeping that in mind is also really important. So good luck. I know you're going to do great. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at this email below.